Mike McMahon, EcoVapor.
EcoVapor. What's happening in the world of EcoVapor today before we get into a little nuts and bolts of the interview?
Sure, no, it's very busy times. With a great team here at EcoVapor. EcoVapor is a company that provides solutions to upstream oil and gas producers around emissions management at the tank battery on the facility. So our solutions allow the operator to reduce emissions and in many cases create a zero emissions pad while at the same time improving cash flow through incremental liquid and gas sales and improves the operational performance and de-risks the facilities by allowing the facility to consistently operate their tank battery at much lower pressures. Higher tank pressures cause higher risk for fugitive emissions and a lot of maintenance around gaskets on thief hatches and that sort of thing. And so our solution, has a lot of different touch points in the upstream process. And, we have over 100 installations in all major basins in the U.S. and, feeling a lot of momentum right now.
Flaring is a big issue in the Bakken and the Permian, other areas as well, but those are the two that are getting all the attention. And a recent report just came out, not too flattering as well. Easy for people to, say, there's a lot of technology out there. What's going on? I'm one of them, actually. So talk to me a little bit about what some of the obstacles are and some of the things that are working out there to help reduce flaring.
Sure. Well, first of all, there's a lot of momentum with reduced flaring and enhanced emissions management, and this comes from both the regulatory side, and we're seeing dynamics, significant dynamics in Colorado. A lot of parallels activities going on right now in New Mexico. Increased activity, with the regulatory side on emissions in Texas, as you mentioned, and North Dakota. And so there's that dynamic. In addition, we're seeing that the large operators, the super majors, are adopting goals that really just go beyond compliance. They want to be leaders environmentally, and this is driven by their corporate culture. Also, in some cases, driven by investors, where there's a strong push to reduce emissions and a high focus on that with these companies. So, we help companies take care of emissions and environmental issues and help them achieve their environmental goals. So, on an upstream well pad, the tank battery typically accounts for about 70 or even 75% of the potential to emit on that pad when the permit is created. And so when the liquids go into the tank battery, and the tank battery is typically maintained at close to atmospheric pressure, there's still a lot of vapor in most cases that is liberated from that liquid and goes into the tanks. The typical or the status quo technique for managing that vapor stream is to burn it, either in an open flare or in some areas like Colorado, it's prevalent to use an enclosed combustor. But there's still emissions that are taking place from the site. So a combustor, from an emissions profile standpoint, is an improvement over an open flare because there is a reduction in VOC emissions, but still significant emissions and ones that many operators are working to reduce. So our solution allows for the consistent, and reliable capture of all the vapors that are generated in the tank battery, and make sure that gas is captured and can meet the specs to enter into a gathering pipeline and be sold. In addition, the vapor that's generated in the tank battery is very rich vapor. Normal natural gas or normal methane is around 1,000 BTU gas. This vapor is typically well over 2,000, and we've even seen as high as 3,000s, BTU gas. So there's a lot of valuable higher carbon components, propanes, butanes, hexanes, pentanes that can be captured, and the NGL market is one that continues to grow, and so the capture of that tank vapor allows for incremental gas sales, but also the opportunity to bring value with the higher C, the NGL components that are present in that stream. So lots of ways that we can help operators, from an environmental compliance standpoint, from a pure emissions, and then environmental de-risking, and then also improve the economics on the site as well.
Talk to me about the economics. Obviously, you guys are in business and you've got some customers, so it's working. Is it a universal economics? Does it differ by shale play? I mean, down in Texas where you got the dry gas, you go up to the Bakken, you've got the wet gas. You mentioned 4 or 5 different kinds, from butane to hectane to pentane. So I know it's not a one-size-fits-all type of a thing, but is there certain plays where the economics work better than others? I guess just have a conversation about the economics a little.
Sure. Yeah, we do see somewhat of a range of economics. And when the oil is a little bit deader, there is a little bit less vapor generated and less potential for incremental liquids capture, but it still exists. But I would say, as a general statement, we see the payback of our systems, that typically, in the months range, certainly less than a year payback. Our conversation with our customer, a new customer, typically begins with that customer either having an environmental issue or an environmental goal that they want to achieve. But obviously, the conversation, also is pretty heavy into the economics. We consistently see internal rates of return, close to 100%, on installations that we do. We recently did an installation in the Mid-Con that demonstrated, an IRR slightly over 100%. And, we'll also lease the units, and the typical payback on a lease is a monthly lease is within the first week to 10 days of operation each month.
You mentioned compliance or regulatory earlier, and there are certain regulations put on flaring, and the fact of the matter is sometimes they're hit, sometimes they're not. But there is a little bit of a direction for either it's a obstacle or it's a assistance to the marketplace a little bit. How are you guys finding the compliance side of things? I know it's different in every place, but is it? It sounds like it's helping you in some instances at least.
Well, the trends in every state, are directionally kind of headed the same way, where there's just a higher level of scrutiny on emissions profile on an upstream pad, and continuing lower tolerance of flaring. So and again, that's coupled with a lot of companies that are adopting their own objectives to stay out in front of that and demonstrate environmental leadership. So we do bring solutions to those operators, and we're pleased to work with them. Specifically, for example, in the state of Colorado, in January of next year, January of 2020, the state will shift to a status of ozone non-attainment, and so the threshold to being classified a major source, the emissions, the tons of emissions that are tabulated to become a major source get cut in half. So historically, the threshold for a major source has been emissions over 100 tons. Starting in January of next year, that threshold goes to 50 tons per year. And operators, want to avoid, being in the status of major source. So, our solution, again, is very effective and very reliable, and it can be used in the permitting process as part of the calculation of potential to emit because it is very reliable, and so permits can be built around a solution where 100% vapor capture is possible, and so we can help operators stay in a more favorable range of permitting.
Where did you say that was happening? Is that nationwide, or is that in a specific state? January 1st, the 50 tons down to from 100.
That's in Colorado.
It is in Colorado. I assume
Yes.
that, but I missed that. So just kind of repeat that one more time, because that is, that's like public affairs here at this point. So starting January 1st, the new regulatory...
It's during the sorry to interrupt, but it's during the month of January.
Sure,
I believe
sure.
It's sometime in late January, but it's during the month of January is the expectation at this point.
Okay, and they're cutting down the major source. See, up in the Bakken, where I'm familiar with, that's been a big problem with the refinery trying to cite. They're trying to cite the refinery as a major source when they're not, and they're trying to round up some numbers for the refinery. But here they're actually changing the requirements, which mean that somebody who was at 75, well under the 100, could be all of a sudden labeled a major source. Am I hearing that right?
Yes, absolutely. And so we're in conversation with several operators here in Colorado who are in that situation, where they have sites that either exist or sites that they are permitting that are between 50 and 100, and all of a sudden they're in a new realm of regulation, and so we're helping them reduce that potential to emit and stay below that 50 tons, and because our solution is very reliable, very high uptime on our equipment, and very reliable ability to capture and sell the vapor, then they can confidently model their permit around that and stay as a minor source.
Boy, that's incredible. That's very, very much like what they did to the coal industry, where everybody's for reduction, but man, they've just really gotten aggressive. I don't know. Is 50% aggressive? It isn't just by first look, but I guess I don't know. I'm not there at the well site.
Well, I'm not an expert, in regulatory, rules or permitting, but it's my understanding that these activities take place around the country where levels of ozone are monitored,
mm-hmm.
and if ozone levels are demonstrated over a period of time to be over a certain threshold, then an area can be declared an ozone non-attainment area, and then these tighter restrictions are put into place. And this is a dynamic that's taking place in Colorado.
Amazing. Absolutely. I mean, I've heard of this, and I've been reading about it, but this is the first time, I guess, that for me, I've experienced it actually happening in real time and out in the marketplace and out in real life. Does that make sense?
Yes. So this condition already exists, or this regulatory environment of being a serious non-attainment area exists in other parts of the country. It exists in areas of South Texas, in the San Antonio area, and so we're very active, helping customers in that area. But and it applies to all industries. So
mm-hmm.
it's basically all permits that are filed, regardless of what kind of business you're in. I think you mentioned coal, or power plants or whatever. Any from now on, any permit that is considered in these areas would have to be considered under that lower threshold.
Amazing.
And you wanted to, in my past history, I've managed facilities that were major sources, and it's something that is very costly, and very challenging to do all the reporting and to maintain that. Maintain a major source. So it's certainly something that any operator in any business wants to avoid if they can.
What are you hearing from the operators on just kind of the flaring side and the emission management, if you will? What is their biggest obstacle that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what we're hearing is that there's just an increased focus on reducing flaring, and improving emissions profile. And again, the circumstances can vary from operator to operator. Sometimes they have open flares that they're just trying to manage the optics of that, but then also just the improving the emissions profile of the facility. Certainly from a compliance standpoint, but also there's just a higher level of scrutiny, with annual reports from public companies and more scrutiny from the public and from investor groups. So we're just seeing a lot of focus and a lot of momentum in reducing emissions.
I see your co-founder, Hans Mueller, was recently recognized as a who's who in energy, huh?
Yes, we're very proud of Hans. Hans and his father, Peter, founded the company 10 years ago. And, Hans is the one who created the patented technology that is the base of EcoVapor. It's patented technology that removes oxygen, from a gas stream. Pipelines that carry gas are very concerned about corrosion. Understandably, and so there are tight regulations or tight specifications on the gas that is introduced into a pipeline, for very low oxygen concentrations. And so it was really Hans and his father Peter who created our technology, and they did it because they saw a need. Peter is a highly experienced upstream and downhole engineer for many years, and so he saw that there's really a need to manage this vapor stream that can get oxygen, and typically gets oxygen in it, and that's a barrier to selling it. But the other thing that they talk about, and we all talk about here in Denver quite a bit, is just our passion for improving the environment. And if you're in Denver and you look to the west, you want to see the mountains very clearly, and without any haze. And so we're very passionate about being very responsible participants in Colorado, and and doing our part to preserve and improve the environment.
I think you mentioned that you're down in Texas. I don't know if you said the Permian or Eagleford. I think you said South Texas, so I'm going to assume the Eagleford. You mentioned Colorado, Oklahoma, North Dakota. I'm not sure if you mentioned the Bakken or you just referred to me. But how many different shale plays are you guys in? Are too many to count, or are there certain ones that you're, that you guys seem to have a consistent business at? I don't know if you mentioned that, but go ahead and kind of explain your guys' footprint a little bit as far as how, what you can do and what you are doing.
Sure. Well, we have a great team, and so our headquarters is here in Denver, and we have service centers in Greeley, Colorado, which is about an hour north of Denver, and then also a service center in Midland, Texas. And so we have over 100 installations in all the major basins, and we're our equipment, our 02 unit is very well designed, and it's very reliable. We typically see uptime of 99.7, 99.8%. So it is not as service intensive. So we are able to cover our installations through those two service facilities, except obviously in the east. So we have installations in South Texas in the Permian. We have many installations in South Texas in the Eagleford, then also both on the Texas and New Mexico side of the Permian, installations in the Mid-Con. The roots of the company are here in Denver, so we have very extensive installations here in the DJ Basin, and then up into the Powder River Basin, and then some installations in the Bakken. We also have a few installations in the Marcellus, and again, an area where there's a lot of very tight oversight for emissions and regulatory compliance. And obviously, there's some areas of the Marcellus and Utica that are fairly dry gas, and others that are wet gas. But we are getting traction in that region as well, and and we can still monitor those units and use local resources for the small amount of maintenance that's required.
What kind of turnaround time do you guys provide or offer, or is that too broad of a question to ask? If, let's say, somebody up in the Bakken says, we need you to stop flaring at our site, what kind of turnaround time do you guys have?
Sure. That's part of the beauty of our 02 units is that they're very compact. They are on a 4 foot by 4 foot skid that's about 11 feet tall, and operate on a small amount of 480 volt power. So we do keep units in inventory, both in our Greeley shop and in our Midland shop. And we have responded from first phone call from a new client to an operation, up and running in a week. So we have a great team of engineers and an excellent ops team, that manage all of our applications work and then commissioning, and we're able to respond very quickly. We have had the great problem of running tight on units because of very high demand here in fourth quarter. So we do work with the operator and make sure we can meet their time frame. Sure. You had mentioned earlier about just focus on flaring and what different companies are doing. We're really proud of the journey that we've been on with Shell, and this information can be found on our website. But Shell adopted a goal of substantial flaring reduction in the Permian, about a year and a half or so ago. And we partnered with Shell, coming up with a system design and a 02 unit to meet their needs. And now we're authoring marketing information that where Shell states that EcoVapor played a significant part in their reducing flaring in the Permian by 80%. So I congratulate Shell on their focus on the environment and their environmental leadership, and we're really pleased to be part of that.
It certainly seems like that's the movement now, is that you need to demonstrate more of an action to go with the environmental platitudes. Not that they were platitudes, but almost like they turned into it, where you had to do an extra above and beyond to go with an environmental energy hybrid, if you will. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, for sure. I believe that all operators want to be environmentally compliant with their permits, but more and more different operators are stepping up and saying, we're going to very proactively manage and reduce our emissions because it's good for the environment and good for our industry. So really, many companies are stepping up and taking more of a leadership role there, and again, we're pleased to be a part of that.
Any final thoughts as we wrap up here?
No, appreciate the opportunity to kind of share where we are. We're very excited about our future, and our industry has a great story to tell. The oil and gas industry has a great story to tell in reducing emissions, and that over the years, but that trend appears to be accelerating. And so I'm very proud of what our industry is doing to be good stewards of the environment and continue to earn our social license to operate. And we're pleased to be a part of it. EcoVapor is unique in that we have significant subject matter expertise in vapor recovery, which operates at very, very low pressure. We're talking about just a few ounces of pressure, kind of like the pressure of a sneeze or something like that. And so we have very, very specialized expertise, and it's just our passion to we've got a great team here. It's our passion to work with clients and help them meet their goals. So appreciate the opportunity to share with you.